I was born to a 15-year-old girl, just a child who made a mistake, just a child who wasn't thinking clearly, just a child who didn't really experience a lot of love in the household, a lot of affection and affirmation in the household, didn't get any of that stuff and searched for it elsewhere. On my birth certificate, there's my mother's name as the mom, and under the father's blank, nothing there. As a kid, I didn't really think anything of it, but things started coming out little by little as I began to age. My mother got married to another man who eventually ended up becoming my stepdad, and he was a great stepdad at that. I'll say that. I was in the car with her one day. We were driving down the road, and she felt like it was appropriate to tell me at the age of maybe about 10, I'd say, that the man I had always thought was my dad was not really my dad. And that's when she told me, he's not your real father. Your real father is someone else. He's out here in the world, and that's just what it was. And I'll never forget how that made me feel. Like it was like a wow type of moment. Like, could you imagine like living your life with somebody, and then all of a sudden you realize, or it's brought to your attention, that this is not who I thought this person was. Why they decided to wait until then, I have no idea, but it happens. As I began to progress throughout life, I just couldn't get it out of my head. Like, who is this person? What does he look like? How old is he? And things of that nature. And when I reached my teenage years, somewhere between the ages of about maybe 15, 16, 17 years old, somewhere in that bracket, my mom told me that she had ran into my biological father, and he wanted to see me. I remember aggressively saying, no, I'm straight. No, thank you. Nope, I don't want anything to do with you. I've made it this far. I think I'll be fine without him. So, my mother, she never pressed it. She just left it alone. And that was just that. And I would shove it out of my mind. I would try to do things to kind of forget about it. And you don't ever really forget those type of things, but I tried to just, get it out my head and focus on the things that were in front of me. The relationship I was in at the time. And yeah, it wasn't until I was about 27, around this time, I had made a very big decision in my life. I had gave my life to the Lord, just changing my life, right? And I remember my wife, she told me, why don't you reach out to your dad again? Those were her words. She was pregnant with our second child at the time. And I said, you know something? You're right. Let me reach out to my dad. So I text my mom and I told her, do you still have his contact information and stuff like that? And she did. She reached out to him. She set up the meeting, and we ended up meeting not maybe about a week or two after that initial talk that me and her had. So I met my father for the first time ever at the age of 27 years old. Yeah, I was about 27 years old when I met him. So many things going through my mind right now. What's he going to be like? What does he look like? I had no idea what he looked like up until this point. That point, is he going to accept me? Am I going to accept him? What are we going to talk about? And when I saw him, of course, I could tell he was nervous. Definitely could tell he was nervous because I showed up with my wife, who was pregnant at the time, and we sat in the restaurant and we just talked and we talked and we talked and about just a lot of different things, career, fitness, faith, all these different type of conversations and stuff. So around this time period, I'm like, okay, my dad's in my life, and what is this really going to do? Like for me at this point, I'm 27. Um, I'm on my own. I'm married with my second child on the way. Things are going okay in our life at the moment, so I'm like, what could possibly be different and change? Now that he's here. I remember he told me he wanted to be attentive in our family. He wanted to help out. He wanted to make up for lost time. And well, I mean, who could blame him? I am his only blood son. He got married. I don't know when, but he got married many, many years ago when I was still a kid, and ended up raising his wife's children. So she had, I think at least two or three children from a previous relationship, if I'm not mistaken. And he ended up raising those kids. You know, you can't help but think about that, from my perspective. So I'm sitting like, how, how are you going to raise another man's children, but you got a whole son over this way that you just didn't even really give a chance to? And those were the things that were just constantly running through my mind. Some things began to come out a little bit later as, our relationship grew, and there's always two sides to a story. Now, remember in the beginning of this video, I told you that my mom was 15 years old when she had me. Um, I was conceived when she was 14. Her birthday is in September. So a couple months later, I was born, just to give you some clarity. My father was a friend of the family. He was a friend of the family, and he saw likeness in my mother. And of course, what happened. There was never really a open relationship. It was more of like a secret hush hush type of thing, honestly, because he was much older than my mother. He was at least in his early 20s, I'd say. So I know, I know everybody's like, oh my, I mean, it was nearly 40 years ago, folks. It is what it is. And that this stuff happens a lot more than you think. A lot more than you think, especially like way back in the day. Like, it was not very uncommon for things like that to happen. But to keep himself, from getting in trouble, he just disappeared. Ended up moving away to Michigan, if I'm not mistaken. That's what he told me. And my to this day, my mom's parents, who are still alive, by the way, have no idea who my father is. Like they don't know. And it's the most, gosh, it's like the weirdest, most, yeah. Anyway, back to my dad. He told us he wanted to make up for lost time, of course. And I remember he created a bank account for me, and basically the goal for him was to put something in that account for us to get anything that we needed, and that was just what he wanted to do. That didn't last. That was a very short-lived thing, and at this point, I'm like, okay, so I mean, I thought that you wanted to be there. I thought that you wanted to help. I thought you wanted to contribute to me and my wife and our children. And there was never really a legitimate explanation as to why the money stopped. It just wasn't. I don't know what happened, honestly. So I just kind of left it alone and dropped it. But something happened in 2014. I met him in 2013, by the way. 2014 comes around, and this horrible, horrible storm comes through. Like I'm in Florida, by the way, so it wasn't a hurricane or anything like that. It was just this really slow storm system that dumped a whole lot of water on us. And without telling the entire story, making this video longer than it has to be, everything flooded in the city, including our vehicles and our possessions and stuff like that. And I remember reaching out to my parents. I told my mom, my stepfather, my grandfather. They all came to our aid. They don't live here in Florida, so it took them about an hour to get here. And they helped us out a lot. And I remember telling my father what was going on, and he didn't really jump to the. He wasn't really attentive in that situation. He didn't really help. He didn't offer any help or anything like that. And my mind was just blown. Like, dude, like we just literally like lost two vehicles that were flooded. At this time, I got a baby on the way. Excuse me, my son was born at this time. He was here, but I had a family to take care of. I was working two jobs at the time. One was out of town, one was here in town. So I need a car. I need transportation and whatnot. Again, that's a whole other story that involved other aspects that caused us to get back on our feet, but it excludes my father because he was not there during any of that process. So you can imagine that this really puts a wedge between me and him because here I am taking a chance on letting you into my life, into my children's life, into my wife's life, taking a chance to establish, I can't say reestablish because there was never a relationship. We only met in 2013, but trying to establish a relationship with my father because it's just the right thing to do. And then something catastrophic like that happens, and I felt like you kind of showed me who you were at that point, or he showed me who he was at that point, or what he was about, and it was heartbreaking for me. It really hurt me a lot, and I held on to that for a long, long, long time. And my dad, he had conversations with my mom. He's like, "What's wrong with him? Why is he mad at me? And what's wrong?" And then my mom's like, "You really are asking that question? Like, you really want to know what's wrong? I mean, your son needed help, and you weren't there. That's just, it's not rocket science." And during that process, I remember him telling her that I just want him to, I'm gonna let him be a man, talking about me. I'm gonna let D be a man. Let him be a man. So I'm like, I'm sorry. I didn't know that that had anything to do with being a man. Trying to figure out how I'm going to get out of this situation. Like, is that what we tell people who go through natural disasters, hurricanes, tornadoes, tear up your house, throw your car across the field, house burns down? Oh, I'm gonna let you be a man. I'm gonna let you be a woman. Like, what does that have to do with manhood? Like, you need help. I needed help at that time. And they always say family first and family's supposed to be there for you and family, family, family. But then when you need family and they don't come through for you, what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to say? You feel me? Like now, my mom, again, stepfather, grandparents, they came through. They did that. They helped us during that time period. So, and my wife's parents, excuse me, her mother, her grandmother, they all helped. Everyone helped, except for my dad. So around that time, I was very angry, and I made this decision. I said, okay, I'm gonna just go over here, and when he's ready to be a father, then we can do this again. When time goes by and you don't hear anything, you don't see anything, many birthdays were missed throughout this time period, birthday calls for myself and my kids, and many, just a lot of stuff, just occurred at the time. And he just would forget, or he didn't, I felt like he wasn't prioritizing it or anything of that sort. And then I just had it one day. It was 2000 and I wanted a car. I wanted to buy a car, another car. This is about 2017. I remember he asked me to come into town and we were going to look at this car. And, we did. We looked at the car. It was really, really nice. It was like a 2018 Dodge Challenger. I love that car. Oh my gosh, that car's so beautiful, man. Oh, don't get me started, but I sat there and revved it up. It was just so nice. And I didn't end up getting it. And nor did he didn't bring it up. Like no nothing of the sort. Like, yo, son, you want me to like help you? You want me to contribute? You want me to do anything? Like it was nothing. Nothing. And don't get me wrong, folks. Let me just say this. I don't feel I'm not an entitled person. Most of what I have, I've had to work for. I've had very, very little given to me. Very little given to me. I wasn't born into privilege. I wasn't born into a family with a whole bunch of money. I didn't go on any vacations as a child. I didn't start going on family vacations until I was an adult, and that was about 10 years ago when I had made the decision to start going on vacations and taking my family out for experiences. So I'm not entitled at all. I don't mind working hard, but at the same time, as a father, like for me, if my kids need me or I want to do something for my kids, I'm going to do it. I don't ever feel like I should stop being a parent. Like that's just how I feel. But when you don't have like a thread of just emotion when it comes to actually wanting to do something fatherly, that bothers me, that bothers me. So time went on, and once again, the rekindling of our relationship started dwindling out again. So I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, maybe maybe it's just not meant for us to even be connected. Maybe his job was just to bring me into the world and then that's it. Maybe I'm not meant to have a relationship with my father. It's just, it is what it is. So, you know, a lot of years went by. About 7.5 to 8 years nearly went by where I just completely stopped talking to my father. I had made up in my mind, I wish I had never met this man. when I was 27. I wish I had just let it go and just tried to do life on my own without him. I mean, what can he possibly do for me at this point? That's what I'm thinking. I work hard, I provide for my family, and God got my back. I'm gonna be all right. And that was just how that's how I was thinking. He would text me throughout the years, throughout that time period. He lost both his parents between that 7.5, 8 year time period. His father died back in 2018, whom I only met one time. And I remember, I reached out to him with a text, told him I'm sorry for his loss and giving my condolences and prayers and stuff like that. Because you got to think, I didn't know that man. I mean, I just, you can't cry and be emotional over someone that you don't know, whether it's your blood relative or not. I don't know him like that. So, but I did have enough respect to like, give my condolences to my father. Um, I think 2020 or 21 or something like that. My father's mother passed away, and that hit him pretty hard. That messed him up pretty bad. I do remember that. And I think I gave him condolences on that as well, because I only met her one time as well. At this point in life, I'm still thinking I don't need him and whatnot. So I just continued on, doing my thing day after day, night after night. One day last year, I was watching a video on YouTube from EX Ministries, G. Craig Lewis. It was a video about forgiveness, forgiving, your parents, and the importance of forgiving your parents. I felt so convicted from watching that video. I remember reaching out to my dad and told him, I forgive you, and I want to see you and all this other stuff. And he was like ecstatic. He was ecstatic, and he came. He came here and he visited us. It was October of last year. It was about a year ago. Came into my home, sat in my living room. We sat there and we talked. He cried. And I remember his words. He said, there's nothing we can do about the past, the mistakes that were made. Let's not point the finger at who did this and who did that, or who didn't do this and who didn't do that. Let's just move forward with, where we are right now in life. And I agreed because around this time, my kids, like my two younger kids, this was the first time that they met him before, but they were like very young. I know they didn't remember him, but this time was different because they had no recalling, no memory of the man that they met back in 2017. But this was somebody completely new I was allowing into our lives again, and we patched things up. We did. We patched things up. We sat and we had conversations, and I was very mature about what I said to him at that time. I told him when I was younger, when we first met, that maybe my expectations were a little bit too high. Maybe I put a little bit too much pressure on him. Maybe maybe I was just thinking unrealistically. I don't know. But as a son, you think like your father's Superman. You think your father can do everything, any and everything for you. At least I can. That's how I feel when it comes to my kids. I feel like I'm Superman to my kids. They look at me like I'm Superman and I can do anything for them. That's just the way it is. And I think that logic, I tried to like press that onto my dad, and that just wasn't the case around that time. I don't know what he was wrestling with or anything like that around that time, but I know that he had been through some things in his life that altered, the way that he thinks and the way that he sees things, and he was a little rough around the edges in his youth. So as we talked about these things, ironing out all of these facts, I told him, I'm like, I get it. I understand, where you are right now in life. You're just trying to just reestablish yourself, try to build something up to leave behind. He's in his 60s now. And I've come a long way when it comes to maturity as well, and not putting so much onto him because, again, I'm a grown man. I'm 39 years old. Like, I don't need my father to hold my hand. However, I do need my father in my life. All men need their father in their life. It takes two to create life, the mother and the father. Men, us, we are givers of life. Like, we don't create life, but we are givers of life. And, the women, they preserve it. I know there's this false narrative being pushed now about women bearing life. That's not true. Like, women preserve it, we give it. I've mentioned that before in the past. But there's this physical connection between a father and his son, a father and his daughter. There's just this connection because I felt it when I gave him a hug. The last time I saw him was actually like nearly a year ago, back around Christmas time. And I gave him a hug, and I didn't want to let him go. It's like I didn't want to let him go, and my wife's like looking at me. She's like, I can tell, you need this at this point in your life. Like, you don't necessarily need your father to like help you or need your father to hold your hand or assist you, but just the fact that you have your father in your life now who's batting for you, who's rooting for you, who's supporting you, which he does, um, that may be all that I need, is, what my wife would insinuate to me. I sit here and I tell this story because there's some of you out here who may have a father in your life, and maybe it's not the best situation. God forbid there's any abuse or anything like that. But if there's no abuse and there's no violence or anything like that, try to patch things up with your dad. Like, try to fix it, because you just never know like where that could go a little bit later down the line. Me and my dad, we got a lot of work to do on our relationship. We got a lot of growing to do. There's a lot that needs to take place as time goes on. He still needs to learn me. I still need to learn him. But we're both at this place where we're open and willing to be patient and to communicate, which is a really, really big thing that I didn't practice when I was 27, 28 years old. Like, communication was not something that I took seriously. Like, now, communication is like key. It is everything to me. Like, I have got to communicate with people and tell people how I feel, because people, if you don't tell them how you feel, they'll never know how you actually feel. They'll never know. But if you do tell them how you feel and communicate your thoughts and your feelings, then you could salvage relationships, you could fix problems. Um, you could really, really save a lot of like just unnecessary drama if you just talk, if you just open up and you just say something. Back in the day, I used to think I shouldn't have to say anything. You should already know what to do. You should already, you should jump to it, get to it. That was the way I used to think. I don't think like that anymore. I do not think like that anymore. It's all logic, and it has to make sense. And the only way anything can make sense is if we communicate properly. And that is where, me and my dad are right now. So right now we're good. We're good. He still has his life. He's working hard. He went hunting a couple of days ago. Maybe I'll get to do that with him one day. I don't know. And he knows on my end, everything's all good over this way. Family's good. And he has made sure that he's told me things that I will always hold near and dear to me. He's told me, he said, son, you are a great man. I'm so happy to call you my son. You're a great father, great representative, and you just grew into a stand-up guy. And every boy wants to hear that from his father. Every boy wants that nod of approval from his father. Every young man wants that pat on the back from his father, that positive affirmation from his father, because it just does something to us. It makes us want to go that extra mile. It makes us want to continue the lineage as time goes on. But I do understand, like, there's some of y'all out here who may not have that with your dad, and my heart goes out to you as well. So, but that's gonna do it for this story. I just wanted to share this with you all because I said what I said, and I mean what I said when I said that men need their fathers in their life. Again, not necessarily to save the day, but just to have that elderly confidence in somebody, meaning I got your back. If you need to talk, I'm here. I've been further up the road than you. If you need me, just reach out. That safety net, and that's it. And that's how I view it. But anyway, hopefully those of you out there who can relate to this can give me a like. If you enjoyed the story, please also give me a like. Subscribe to this channel if you're new, and share it if you get an opportunity. Peace.